So 5, 4.
Good morning, John.
Stop saying good morning there. Let's do it at different times.
I know.
So.
Hello, and welcome to the Retireable Podcast. I'm Mike Wallace.
And my name's John Sauger.
Well, good morning, John.
Mike, I'm going to say hello to you again because you do this every time. People are listening to this at different times during the day. So good morning if that's when you're listening to it, or good afternoon or good evening. Go Truman Show.
It's kind of a joke because, John, I say good morning because that's when we're recording it. And obviously, you could be listening to this at whatever, 10 o'clock at night. And so it's one of his pet peeves is that I say good morning. And so I just did it anyway. So we're having fun with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What we've realized with this podcast is it's sometimes difficult and droll information, but it's really important to listen to. So we're going to try and add more humor as much as we can on this, right? I mean, that's the way it's got to be for people to listen to it, I think.
Oh, yeah. No, we have fun with that. And obviously, we're hoping the listeners have fun as well and learn something along the way without getting too much into the weeds. Although we like to talk into the weeds sometimes, John, because that's what we do for a living.
We have to keep ourselves on track.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so John, I had some exciting. I heard you had some exciting news in your household. So I wanted you to tell me a little bit about what is new in your life there.
So as we kind of record this and as we've gone through stuff, it's interesting because we do this at different times throughout the year, and we try and track things. But we're recording this a little later in the year, but over the summer, my middle daughter actually got married.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been a very we're recording in year 2025. This has been a very busy year for her. She got her doctorate in occupational therapy in April, and then passed her boards, and now has a full-time job in that. But she also during that time got married and rented a house, and she went through all the grown-up stuff in your 20s, that you're going through in 1 year. But yeah, so we had a fantastic wedding. It was really she and my son-in-law wanted to keep it a very small, intimate wedding. They only had about 100 people, and a lot of them were friends and close friends and family. But it was really just a gorgeous, perfect day. I mean, you couldn't ask for it any better. The venue was an outdoor venue. It wasn't necessarily like people think of like a barn or a farmhouse. This was actually a greenhouse.
Oh, really?
So there were flowers everywhere. Just everywhere you looked was some sort of different flower or beautiful picture or what. Where she got married was this beautiful sculpted flower horticulture. I mean, it's just topiaries everywhere. It was just absolutely gorgeous.
That's a big word there, John. I like that.
Yeah, cute. and then the wedding itself was just fantastic. Well, what was the coolest part about it for me? So I was married. My wife and I were married by my father-in-law, but we were married on his birthday. And so this year, when they were picking dates, my daughter was like, your birthday is one of the dates that's available. Do you care? And I said, no. And so they actually ended up doing it on my birthday. And so she was super excited. She's like, you and Mom got married on Papa's birthday, and now we get married on your birthday. So it's kind of like a thing now. So that's kind of a fun thing.
That's real cool. Yeah, that's real cool. And that's your first child that's got married, right?
Yes, it is.
And so John and I have been doing this for quite a long time, and we've been with this company for I have been over 30 years, and John's been 22 years. Okay. Yeah. But we're similar ages. We have kids about the same ages. He's a little younger than me, so I'm the old man, but we're at that time where our kids are about that age, and so.
Do you remember? So most people are listening to this probably local, but if not, we're in the Detroit area. Do you remember our families used to go back years ago when our kids were young? We used to go get cheap tickets for the Detroit Pistons games. Remember, we would go we'd go to dinner beforehand and go to Pistons games and have all the little kids there. And now it's like, yeah, that's crazy how long ago that was to think that these are all now adults and grown-ups. But
Pistons and Tigers for sure. We went down there quite a bit. Yeah. So no, it is crazy. Now they're all grown up, right?
Yeah.
as
Yes.
they, as
Yeah.
they say. But what's kind of unique and interesting though, and it's kind of funny, and obviously you've experienced it, but at some point, when we started going to weddings, and you probably happened to you as well, you're used to when you used to go to weddings when you were younger, you'd watch the wedding through your own wedding. You
Yes.
look back and say, okay,
Yeah.
this is what happened at my own wedding, or you see it through your eyes, and then all of a sudden, at some point, and I don't know how long ago it was, let's say 10 or 15 years ago, you're starting to look it through the parents' eyes,
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
okay now
Very different.
and so now every time I go to a wedding, because I
Yeah.
know I'm gonna have
We're
to
getting close.
host a wedding or
Yep.
or,
Yep.
or be
Yep.
part of that, in relatively soon, and so you just kind of look at it through a different lens, and it's kind of unique and kind of cool too when
It
you do that.
it's very different. You don't think about this. You will experience this with being the father of the bride was a totally different like that there is a lot more stuff you're doing. You're a lot more active. We talked about it afterwards, and Emma and I, my daughter talked about it afterwards. She's like, Dad, I didn't realize how active you and I were because the whole wedding prep, just a quick backstory. So Emma's focus was she didn't want her husband or Matt to see her until she walked down the aisle.
Yeah.
So there's a thing they call the first look, which is now common where the photographer gets a lot of pictures of the bride and the groom beforehand. And she's like, no, I don't want to see you until we walk down the aisle. So I ended up being the first look. So I had not seen her until she was dressed for her wedding
Aw.
stuff. So they have pictures of that and everything. But that meant that both Matt and I were out on a lot of the planning. So and the mother and daughter and the mother-in-law, but the mother and the daughter are doing so much of the conversation together. So I was used to talking to Emma on a regular basis. We talk all the time. Well, we didn't as much because it was wedding planning.
Okay. Yeah.
So you go through and it was like she and my wife Mary were doing a ton of the planning. And so it was that weird conversation of you're a part of it, but you're just working on your own stuff, making sure you're ready for your speech, or making sure you're ready. I mean, for the father, the daddy daughter dance or father daughter dance or whatnot. You do it to all the different things. And we were talking about it afterwards, and Emma said to me, she goes, "Dad, we practiced and we did little things, but we had never." She's like, Dad, I just didn't realize how much I was relying on you to do all these different things because we didn't talk about most of those things. And Emma's a planner.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. She planned all, she and Matt planned everything. It was beautiful, but she's a planner and she's like, yeah, I just didn't realize how much you'd be doing. She goes, I knew what you'd be doing, but I didn't realize you were doing all of that, and it was interesting because like while they're getting ready, my other daughter, who was the maid of honor, was like, oh, I forgot to get balloons for the bridal suite. Oh, I forgot to do, and all the little things. It was like, Dad's the one that does all that stuff. So I'm racing around. I mean, it was as busy of a day as I've ever had, but it was worth it. It was worth it. It was wonderful. Yeah.
Well, and it's probably one of those experiences too that there's a lot of things in life that you can kind of empathize with, or you can kind of see it, but until you experience it, you would just never get it. You know what I mean?
You know what it is, Mike? It's the you see it, you go through it, but then when it's happening to you, you're every minute of the day, every minute of even talking about it now, every minute was like, okay, don't forget this, because this, like, not in a bad way, but like, I want to remember this feeling. I want to remember this experience because it's now coming around again, right? So it's definitely top 5 days of my life, right? That type of thing. But it's like I want to remember all these things, and so that's really cool about it.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
No, I'm so glad and so happy for you. I'm glad it worked out for you as well, and even that the weather cooperated, because
Oh, yeah.
that is kind of one of those things. It's a chance, right? When you do that,
Yes, and especially a summer wedding. It could be too hot. It could be rainy. It could be. No, it was perfect.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
No, that's fantastic. Okay, we can probably talk finances now, maybe.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's get into some conversation.
Yeah. So I know, we were talking that this is recorded a little bit later in the year. However, we wanted to kind of, after the dust settled, we've had a lot of training and learned a little bit about this, what they call the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And the other day we were actually learned about a acronym for this as well. So John, what did you hear that they call this now?
One of the acronyms was ABBA, which is the old, what are they, the Finnish band, Swedish band, whatever. That's
with an O.
Yeah.
OBBA.
Which you'd think it'd be OBBA. Yeah, maybe they'd say OBBA or
Yes. So we got to have the dancing clean music in the
yeah,
background.
absolutely. Well, this is playing.
Well, it's being edited.
Yes.
Maybe they can add that music in.
For sure,
That'd be
for sure.
fantastic.
It fit for this conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing about it, though, that as we're learning more about it, as we're hearing more about it, even when you're going to listen to this, there's going to be parts where you're going to say, wait a minute, is that what's going on? So like some of the wording isn't done. You're like, okay, this is happening in this piece of legislation, but then we don't have the exact wording of what it means or
Yeah.
where it's at. So understand as we talk through this, this is subject to change, subject to adjust a little bit as we hear how it's going to go into fact. But the basic premise behind this is there's a lot of other legislation that goes with it, right? But what we're talking about in this piece of legislation is how it relates to taxes and how it relates to tax planning. Is that
Yeah,
fair to say?
that's exactly right. And I think that the key is that they extended the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of
Yes.
2017,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so in that they had lowered the taxes to historic, lows. And so there was this planning opportunity that you had for this finite period of time. And so once Trump was reelected, that the hope was that this was actually going to get extended, and it did. And so what that basically means is the lower tax bracket has been extended, and it's I'm not going to say permanent because it'll get changed eventually, right?
Sure.
But there is not a stop date like there was originally.
Correct. Correct.
And so we just know that it's until the next president or two presidents from
Congress
now,
or whatever, who knows? Yeah.
But this extension, so we do have these planning opportunities to be able to continue, and that's really one of the key things. And part of that is not only that the tax brackets were a little bit extended and the tax rates were lowered, but that standard deduction as well continues.
Which is interesting, because coming at it from a different direction as you're thinking about this or listening to this, if you're coming at it from a different direction and you're saying, okay, these tax rates are lower, the question that I've gotten from a lot of people is, okay, tax rates are lower, but does that mean my taxes are going to be higher in the future, or should I just do I have to stop my tax planning because it's not a big deal? And so what we've done is look at it from, this is a reprieve on the sunsetting the end of 2025, which is what we were planning on. Now we have a little bit longer, but it's kind of like back in the day when you were studying for a test and you go in and you think you're prepared and you go in to take that test and the teacher or the professor says, sorry, we're not doing it today. You got to do it next week. And you feel like you're even a little bit better going, okay, you could go home and go, oh, I don't have to study anymore or you could push forward and go, well, now I have an extra week to prepare and now I'm going to really do well on this. That's kind of how we're looking at taxes. We do still believe taxes are going to be more expensive in the future. We've done workshops, we've done, restaurants, libraries, universities, et cetera, where we've polled people and we've asked the question, do you, and pretty consistently, it's close to 100%. I mean, it's 99% of the people also believe taxes are going to be higher in the future. So this doesn't mean we stop our tax planning. This means we've gotten a little bit of a reprieve, but now we've gotten more opportunity to do more planning.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so, and it just made it's been a little simpler as well, because a lot of times people were itemizing, okay, and they're collecting the receipts. And again, we have a tax and accounting firm that we're affiliated with here as well. And just, people used to bring shoe boxes of the receipts, if you remember, and or bags, little plastic bags. And now, because of the standard deduction, which this year is going to be $31,500 for married couples and $15,750 for single filers, most of that is just the standard deduction. So they don't have to calculate their individual things.
So for people listening at home, or for like, Dave, our internal person who does the editing for this, receipts were the paper thing you got at restaurants or other places that they got. Now you get that all electronically. You don't have to worry about that anything. But they could bring in a listing of their receipts, or they could email that to us. But back in the day, people used to get pieces of paper that showed what they would pay.
So you take electronic receipts from like restaurants then, John?
Well, no, but I'm saying, remember back in the day, you just would handwrite that. They'd handwrite it and give you a receipt.
No, you're right. Well, it is funny you say that, because even, to this day, a lot of the receipts that we do, and so I store some of it electronically, but even like an Amazon receipt, let's say I buy something for business, I still print it out and put it in my ding file, because I've been doing it for 30 years, and you're probably right. There's probably a better way to organize that, but, in an electronic way, but I'm still old school.
Well, it's called technology, Mike, and some people do that. But
that's funny.
The thing I think, though, what you're looking at in that is what you started to mention, though, some of the different adjustments and changes.
Yeah.
A lot of the things you've been doing the same, but like you said, there are some adjustments that we pay attention to in that the standard deduction, what that means for our planning, where that's at. That's something definitely to pay attention to. The one of the things we've talked about a lot with families, we've talked a bit about it on here on the podcast. If you listen to other episodes, is some of the giving strategies, some of the charitable giving strategies, and different things. There's going to be some adjustments on that as well. What we've talked about a lot is different strategies for that, because the standard deduction is so high. If you're giving, a few $1,000s here or there, which is no small amount of change, mind you, but if you're giving a few $1,000s here or there, you weren't even really tracking it because the standard deduction was so high. Well, we can now pay attention. We have the opportunity to really maybe target that. So instead of saying, and I literally was talking with a family yesterday, they do give money every year, but we're going to wait this year and we're going to gift that money in January. So they saved it this year, but we're going to give it in January, and then they're going to give again in December. So they're going to give twice for their charities in 2026. But those being together will be able to constitute as a charitable gift and be able to track it and get a little bit better deduction. So there's just some advanced planning on some giving that we can do. That is some good opportunities. You should be talking to ideally us,
Yeah.
or someone on does that help you in some planning in that regard as well?
And a lot of the charitable charities were suffering because of that standard deduction. So at least they brought back a little bit of that. And so really what the rules say now, in starting 2026, that you can get up to $1,000 deduction for single, up to $2,000 for joint. We can still continue some of the other stuff. We've talked about in other episodes, the qualified charitable deductions or the donor advised funds. But they do have a new floor, the itemized charitable deductions as well, at 0.5%. So basically, the way I understand this, and John, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that if you can donate up to 0.5% of your gross income, okay? But that's the floor to get that deduction. So for example, if you earned $100,000, okay, and you have 0.5%, just like $500. Yeah, I mean, you have that if you think that additional $500, or I think you have to have a $500 or more charitable giving of that to get that deduction. If I read that correctly.
So yes, you essentially the floor is established that you're that amount is counted already. If you give above that you can't count that as extra type of thing.
Yes,
Yep. The key on that, though, again, as the words of this are being written, what I mean by that is we have the spirit of the law. This is what we're planning on doing. We don't necessarily have the exact tax code of how it's written and how someone is going to file it. So in that situation, as the spirit of the law is understood, again, it's another planning opportunity. Yeah. And you should be talking to someone in that regard.
But the other part of that whole thing is that it's subject to interpretation.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
Yes.
so it's so funny. We've done this over the years. We've been to different conferences and so forth. And we'd have one seminar, one session, I should say, and then the brainy tax guy interpreted it one way. And like literally the next session,
someone undid that and said, "No, I interpreted
it this way."
Yeah.
And then, let's really confuse us, right? So
the interesting thing about that is, you do find families that you work with that they want to know everything, that with their background, they're studying, they're understanding. So they want to hear everything. So they're going to different workshops to hear different things. But the vast majority of people go, "Mike, I just want to hear it from you. What does this mean to me?" And you're looking at it going, "Okay, how do I explain this in simple wording?" And that's where, this is a difficult piece of legislation to be able to explain in simple wording. It's not like your taxes are lower. Oh, well, that's easy. I can understand it. There's 12 other things that we have to keep in mind on this. So that is something to really pay attention to on this, is that there will be planning opportunities. There will be conversation points. There will be things you can look at, but it's still, again, this is a work in progress of how it fits for every family. Not work in progress. It's not the right wording. It's a different opportunity for every family. One family, it might be we're doing more charitable giving. Another family might simply be your taxes are lower, so you're not putting into a traditional IRA or a traditional retirement account. You should be putting into your Roth retirement account, right? Yeah. Every family is going to be a little bit different on that.
Well, and a lot of the things are based on income too, And so so just because one family gets it doesn't mean the other family's going to get it either. Like even the new senior
Yes.
deduction,
Yes.
and so you have that bonus deduction, they call it. And that's if you're over age 65, you get an additional $6,000, okay,
Correct.
of a deduction. So now this did get passed, but this is one of the few things that aren't being sunsetted, okay, because one of the campaign promises was to try to not to tax Social Security. Obviously, this is bringing too much revenue in for the government, so they couldn't get that passed. But this is at least a little bit of a reprieve for the next 4 years. If you're over age 65, you get an additional $6,000 deduction per person.
So and it phases out.
Yes.
That's the other thing to keep in mind. So I've seen some people say it phases out after the second bracket. So the 10% and the 12% bracket, which would be, 53, 54,000 modified adjusted gross income for a single filer, 105-ish for joint filers. I've seen it phases out that way. Then I've also seen it a different way, saying, well, 100,000 for a single person and 200,000 for a married couple, and it phases out. So you've seen it in different fashions, again, open to interpretation. But the way we're reporting it, the way we've seen it most recently is the 100,000 and 200,000 number.
Did it get increased? Because when I looked at it before, it was 75,000 for
and 150,
and
right?
150,000.
Right.
Okay.
So it is.
So it could have changed.
Yeah. So
that's the old stuff that I looked at.
Well, no, but I think that's a great conversation point. So don't use our language on this one.
Look it up apparently, because when I have both different numbers. Yeah.
But what I think on this that's important, and I think I've mentioned it this way, Mike, is this is probably a good reason to go to maybe a workshop before the end of the year, or maybe contact your tax person or your financial person. If your financial person isn't aware of taxes, again, reach out to us. This is one of the things this is a conversation to have. I had this conversation with a family yesterday, and we started forecasting on what we were doing for Roth conversions and other tax planning. And she said, John, I wanted to factor in the $12,000 additional component here. And so that became a conversation of, mathematically, if we're doing a Roth conversion, we're paying attention to IRMA, we could go up to a $200,000, $212,000 income, so they're not paying a penalty on their Medicare, and do some Roth conversions, which would add to their income, right? I don't want to be too into the weeds on this, but then if we're factoring in trying to get this $12,000, how is it adjusted? How is it modified out? We were looking at the $200,000 number versus the 150. So it is, there's a lot of moving sliding parts here.
Well, and the interesting part of it is that all the numbers are different. So for example, there's an exemption on tips right now, right?
Sure.
The exemption on tips is up to $25,000. Of overtime income, okay, and it's 12,500 for single, 25,000 for joint. But then the income is done from 150,000 or 300,000.
Right.
So then we talked about that, or even like your auto loan. The auto loan interest that's the 100, 200 we talked about either as well, and you can deduct up to $10,000. And there's a lot of specifics about that because we're looking for American-made cars. And
what's very interesting is, because I was researching this, so one of the automotive companies was changing their internal, how like you could get the family plan or the employee plan or the different things. They were offering a 0% interest, and you're like, well, the 0% interest is good, but now I don't get any deduction on the, so you're going, what's best for my tax?
Oh yeah.
Because
so then it's just an incentive for them to sell the cars.
Correct. So a lot of moving parts. I think the other thing is you have some year-over-year planning of what the brackets are, what the state and local tax deduction is, the SALT deduction, as they say. There's that's been moved up. You have like your charitable giving. You also though have like advanced stuff. There is this thing. They literally called it the Trump account, which is the $1,000 for newborns that fit in a certain category, right? And so that one it's a very interesting one, because that one hasn't been necessarily explained either. But it's like, okay, we're giving you $1,000 for a newborn, but where's that going? How does that work? Right. So the concept is there. We want to see a little bit how it lays out, but suffice to say, that is not necessarily a planning tool to have a newborn. Don't get me wrong here, but people that are, we want to make sure we're taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
Right.
So the way that one works is there's $1,000 that's going to be added to your account. It's going to be tax advantage for children born between December 31, 2024. So anybody who was born this year all the way to January 1 of 2029. So December 31st of 2028. So 4 years, I guess, the way that works.
Yeah.
Um, and then the parents can contribute up to $5,000 as well into
Right.
this account. So it's kind of funny. This started and this was passed on July 4th of this year, and we're a few months in now past that. And it's still, we don't, like, people
Oh,
ask
yeah.
me all the time, how
Yeah.
do you do it? Where do you get it?
Well, the other part of it is, um, we've had some different conversations. So you can't withdraw money from that. My understanding is that you can't withdraw money from that for the child until they're 18, and at which point it becomes an IRA. So it's not necessarily like the same thing as a 529, or so it again, it requires some planning of how are we using that, because if someone's adding $5,000, to a child or a grandchild's account, right? Where's the best spot to do that? Again, it's a planning conversation. Well, what's the purpose of what we're using that for? Because again, a 529, still under the current rules, you can convert money from a 529 up to your deposit account each year into a Roth IRA if it's not used for college education. So it's like, do I want an IRA when they're 18, or do I want to be able to convert that to a Roth IRA? So there's some planning tools there
That's
again.
for sure, because it is tax deferred. So that's eventually, this is going to be a big, tax benefit to the United States government.
Correct.
Eventually down the road, because it's tax deferred. And like you said, it can be used at age 18. But part of that is there's some qualified, because it turns into a regular retirement account. But
Yeah.
there's some things you can use for educational purposes
Sure.
or the purchase of a new home. There's, again, I've not seen that written out directly.
Correct.
There's just been, I mean, there's some generic language right now.
I think the premise behind it again is in any situation is knowing the rules and knowing what can take advantage. If this is a quote unquote free account where the $1,000 is put in, I mean, granted, I guess we're paying through that in other ways through our taxes. I understand that, but for young families, that is a good opportunity. You want to make sure you know the rules and can take advantage of it. Or for grandparents that are saying we want to help our kids out, this is something to know the rules and take advantage of. So
Yeah.
again, something to pay attention to. But as with almost everything we've said during this episode, we still need further clarification on more specifics. And
Well, and I think when we're looking at this too, there's some of the rules are very specific, but we have to look at the whole picture and how it affects people and planning opportunities. But there's this whole thing about taxation while you're alive, okay, and then if you're a joint taxpayer, what if something happens to one of the spouses? Then you're now a single taxpayer, so you can now plan for that. But then what if something happens to both of them? We have to plan for what's the taxation upon the demise too.
Yeah.
And so, one of the good things that did happen with this is that they did expand the estate tax as well, and
Yeah.
so it's 15 million for a single taxpayer, 30 million for a joint taxpayer. And what I really like about this more than anything else is the fact that, and it's supposedly permanent, obviously we don't know what that means, is that a lot of the middle class millionaires got really hit over the years
Sure.
with these estate taxes. Okay. And particularly, we'll see a lot of like the farming community that they didn't really have a lot of money, but their land might have been worth several $1 million or $5 million or $10 million, or a small business where the business may generate a few $100,000 a year, but it may be worth $5 or $10 million. And so people had to sell these businesses or sell the land to pay the estate taxes.
Well, and all too often, you from an outside point of view, you hear millions of dollars and you think, oh, this is, but that person didn't live an extravagant lifestyle, right? They were a farmer, and they were just working the land and possibly even living paycheck to paycheck. And all of a sudden, the family owes this, or someone owes this large amount of money. And you're going, wait a minute, that didn't necessarily compute. Or a small business person that's working, 80 hours a week, scraping by to keep the business going, and then they pass away. And that is the hard part of that plan, of trying to make sure that okay, that family, their work was respected, and I'm trying to think of the right word, but honored, right? That wasn't, because a lot of these people weren't jet setting around the world, or living at I'm not picking on the Four Seasons, but staying at the Four Seasons. This episode brought to you by the Four Seasons. It's that type of thing. We can't say that this is like we're not picking on them as one of our biggest sponsors, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Well, and even if they're making a respectable middle class millionaire or middle class living, the issue is they're not because of some of the old tax laws, they may not be able to continue that for their next generation or the third generation, right? Because they literally said, okay, I have to sell this business. I mean, yes, they may cash out and make some money, but they're not going to be able to continue the legacy. So, any other things you want to say about the OBBA, right?
Yeah,
ABBA, OBBA,
I heard someone else say
ABBA,
the OBBB.
OBBA.
Okay, you know, again, the only thing I would say on this is stay tuned, right, for more information. Stay tuned for more follow up. This is a moving a moving piece of legislation that there's so many different things happening with it. As we're recording this, not maybe not when you're listening to it, but you'll be aware of this. We're in the middle of a just finishing one of the longest shutdowns in U.S. government history, or modern U.S. government history. That some of this legislation impacts that, or has been talked about in that, and that's some of the reasoning is changes in. And again, when you get into political conversations like that, we don't want to discuss politics or pick a side or whatnot. That we're just looking at it from a standard point of view. This piece of legislation is impacting some of the things that we're dealing with every day. Right?
Well, and part of it got permanently extended, and part of it got temporarily extended. That might change again at January 30th.
Absolutely.
So that's because you gotta look at that as well. So I guess the highlights we want to just kind of point out is that it did extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. So we do have the continued lower tax rates, at least for a while. It also then increased the standard deduction permanently as well to the larger standard deduction. Yep. And then we do have an additional senior over 65, $6,000 for the next 4 years per person based on income. Okay. So
and the other part of that, the other part of that from a filing standpoint, the other thing to keep in mind is that we're discussing this as a planning opportunity, not for a filing opportunity, right? Your tax filing status is going to be a little bit different. You're going to want to talk to a qualified professional on that. You're going to want to talk to someone that actually does tax preparation, which we do, you and I do not, that does tax situation. We're talking about it from a planning perspective of how do these numbers fit in? What opportunities are there to make sure you're not paying more than your fair share, legally, ethically, morally.
And literally a lot. When it comes to the financial part of it, it
Absolutely.
could be like either the Roth conversions might be in a lower tax bracket. A lot of times we can keep those capital gains maybe even at 0%.
Sure.
Do a little bit more tax loss harvesting potentially.
Absolutely.
So it's just, again, and that's just we're just using a couple little examples. But yeah, we don't want to use this and be educated about it, or just rely on smart people like us, John, right?
Absolutely.
To help them make the best decisions for themselves and for their family.
And if they want to get a hold of us, what's the best way to do that?
So they can call our 800 number, 1-800-977-9292, or they can go to our website,
which is FSA and the number 1.com, FSA1.com.
Fantastic. Well,
so let's use this point now as we get to this point. In every episode, we get to this conversation point at the end of every episode where we want to talk about something actually that is interactive, right? And in the past, we've been pretty generic about some of these examples, but we call this our holistic happening segment. And what this is Mike or I, through the course of a week, through the course of the in between time periods of when we do recording, we run into families all the time where we're not just doing financial planning, or we're not just having a conversation on one subject matter. It's a blended subject matter that comes up. That is, we talk about being holistic and making sure all of these things are taken care of under one roof or under one thing, and the peace of mind that a family gets in that situation. So usually we go back and forth with different examples. So Mike, do you have an example of something you've come across?
I do, and what I want to kind of talk about a little bit, and it's kind of interesting because as you know, John, over the years, our when we deal with our prospects or deal with clients or referrals, and obviously we both have quite a few existing clients, and their circumstances change over their lifetime as well, or they may have a life-changing event, etc. And so oftentimes we're being approached on one of the things that we love to do, and what's great and what we take so much pride in is we retire people,
Sure.
And we see that, and some of these people we've been working with for quite a while before they retire. But sometimes we get people come in here and they're like, okay, I want to retire next year, right? And so what we're trying to aspire for is this work optional lifestyle. And so, and it's a little easier when somebody, has a pension, or they may retire, at 67 or whatever that may be.
Sure.
But a lot of people now, and that we're dealing with, are aspiring for this work option lifestyle earlier, right?
Sure.
And so if people have goals, and it's funny because we deal with a lot of even some of the kids and grandkids of our existing clients, and say, they're maybe 35 years old, and I want to retire at 55, and
Sure,
so,
sure, sure.
but a lot of times we're dealing with it, and so. So I recently had well, I'll say a little bit of a young couple, and I say they're younger because I must be in, I mean, my son wouldn't say they're younger, right?
Right,
They're,
right.
early 50s, right? And they're saying, okay, that they want to retire in the next 3 years, okay? And so, really, what it comes down to, and we talked a little bit about the work option lifestyle, is a lot of people can retire. Okay. It's just a matter of what is that lifestyle. Okay. And
Exactly.
so that was kind of the keys that we're looking at. And one of the great things though, too, is it's math, it's numbers. And we're looking
Yes.
at, and of course, with technology nowadays, there's a lot of probability of success. There's a lot of programs out there that we can kind of punch in those numbers and look at it and say, okay, if I want to retire, what are the things that that I have to consider? Well, if you're prior to 55, okay, especially if you have most of your retirement in retirement assets. Okay, is how do I have access to my retirement assets?
Sure,
Because there's
sure.
limitations
There's a
there.
59 and a half.
There's a 59.5 rule. There's also a 55 rule.
Yep.
Okay, which a 55 basically is you retire after age 55 and you have a 401k or a plan through work. You usually have accessibility from that plan
Oh,
only.
as long as you leave it in that
Yeah,
plan.
as long
Yeah.
as you leave it in there, right?
Yep.
And so we're looking at some of those planning opportunities, but then let's just say look at the math itself and say, okay, I have X number of dollars, and I want to be able to live this lifestyle. And so whatever that number may be, and say, okay, let's say it's $8,000 a month, or $6,000 a month, or $10,000 a month. Do I have enough money? How long that money's going to last? We can do Social Security projections, because we can go to socialsecurity.gov and get those
Yep.
projections and see, okay, I'm going to have, spouse A take it at 62, spouse B take it at 67. And then, of course, we're looking at sort of planning opportunities that we talked about as
Yep.
well. Is it
Absolutely.
going to be tax-free income? Is it going to be taxable income? So, but one of the things that we want to look at is just, if you ever are thinking about that. And I had a client just come in, was it last Monday actually, and they were planning on working to 65. He hates his job. He's 62 years old. He wants to retire July of next year
Yep.
and wants to see if he can,
Yeah.
And so, and so it's not a matter. I know his finances. He can, but I don't know if it's the lifestyle that he wants.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure,
And
sure, sure.
so what is that difference may be? Okay, well, maybe the difference may be he gets a part-time job and he gets an extra $20,000 a year, and then it might
And
be
then it's
fine.
time. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so a lot of it's looking at that. So I just wanted to, first of all, plan early for that stuff, because I've ran projections for younger people, and then we every couple of years we do that, and then all of a sudden they say, okay, this is reality now.
Yeah.
And especially since we've been in a little bit better marketplace the last couple of years.
Absolutely.
So like where I
People's
thought it
people's
might have
accounts have
been,
grown dramatically. Yeah.
where I thought it might have been an extra, they may have to work an extra 3 years, may only be 2 years now, So, but run those numbers, look at it, do the projections, and then more importantly, I think most of the people, the people that we deal with, a lot of the middle class millionaires and people that are aspiring to be that, will have enough money to retire. It's just looking at the
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Yep.
You
Absolutely.
want to travel? What do you want to do? And some people
Well,
are happy just sitting home and not doing a lot. And there's other people that want to travel the world, and everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and I think it's a really great point is knowing what that looks like, right? Like looking as you're listening to this again, as you're looking at it. There's not a lot of people that are going to say, I want to retire at, I don't know, 55 years old. Let's just use that example. They're going to say, I want to retire at 55 and sit on the couch.
Yeah.
It's no, I want to retire, and these are the things I want to do. Great. What does that entail? Well, is that based on the money you have? Is that one of you, like you said, working optional? Is that one? But that's part of planning. That's the conversations that you have to have. And that's where it's beneficial to sit down with someone like you or I to say, hey, this is what I want to do. And we can, not just that we're doing the math, like you said, or we have the software to show the math, but it's also the experience of saying, well, we've seen, like you said, we've retired hundreds of thousands of people, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of people that in that situation, this is what they wanted to do, or this is what transpired, or this is this. There's so many variables that could come up, but having someone that you can trust to have that conversation with, really, really important.
And a lot of it is bridging the gap too. You may have healthcare costs, for
Sure.
example, to a certain period of time, or like you said, until you get some sometimes they have some of the pensions that we see sometimes are grandfathered. They might
Sure.
not be huge, but they can't get it till 65. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
right.
And so
Well, and Medicare in most situations, Medicare
yeah,
doesn't start till 65. So what's the
yeah.
healthcare situation? How do we plan for that?
So it's not just a lot of it is gap planning,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it just so sometimes you have to look at that as well. Well, I think again that's a
Yep.
recurring thing we talk about, but I think it's just so important, and the earlier the better to at least have some ideas,
Absolutely.
because then it's goal setting, right? You have goals, and then you understand it, and then when part of our job is that accountability, making sure that people are accountable. If you want this goal and you're not on track, we
We have
want
to
to tell
talk
you,
about it.
yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great spot to end it there.
Yeah.
Is that bit of a conversation. So if we wrap it up, Mike, what's the best way they can get a hold of us again?
With our phone number is 1-800-977-9292.
The website is fsa1.com.
Yeah, and in fact, if you want to set a virtual meeting or a in-person meeting or a phone call, you actually can go on the website and click on our calendars, and we can actually even do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you so much for listening. This has been the Retireable Podcast.
I'm Mike Wallace.
And I've been John Sauger. Mike, go ahead and count us out.
3, 2, 1. Oh,
Over to you, Dave.
Investment advisory products and services are made available through FSA Advisors, FSAA, a registered investment advisor. Annuity and insurance products are offered through Financial Services of America, Financial Services of America, FSA Health Insurance Agency, doing business as FSA Insurance Agency, FSA Tax and Accounting, and FSA Advisors are commonly owned and operated by FSA Marketing Incorporated. FSAM. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. The insurance products offered by Financial Services of America FSA are not subject to investment advisory requirements. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. FSA. A is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Chartered Retirement Planning. Counselor and CRPC are trademarks or registered service marks of the College for Financial Planning in the United States and/or other countries. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by FSAA.